Q71. An organization plans to extend its Mule APIs to the EU Frankfurt region. Currently, all Mule applications are deployed to CloudHub 1.0 in the default North American region from the North America control plane. Following this naming convention, API name environment, for example, order SAPI, dev order SAPI, QA order SAPI, prod, etc. There is no network restriction to block communications between APIs. What strategy should be implemented in order to deploy the same Mule APIs to the CloudHub 1.0 EU region from the North America control plane, as well as to minimize latency between APIs and target users and systems in Europe? A. In Runtime Manager, for each Mule application deployment, set the region property to EU Frankfurt and reuse the same Mule application name as in the North American region. Communicate the new URL's API name, environment at dci.cloudhub.io to the consuming API clients in Europe. B. In API Manager, set the region property to EU Frankfurt to create an API proxy named API name Proxy environment for each Mule application. Communicate the new URL API name Proxy environment at the c1.cloudhub.io to the consuming API clients in Europe. C. In Runtime Manager, for each Mule application deployment, leave the region property blank default and change the Mule application name to API name environment.dcl. Communicate the new URL's API name environment at ci1.cloudhub.io to consuming API clients in Europe. D. In API Manager, leave the region property blank default to deploy an API proxy named API name Proxy environment.dcl for each Mule application. Communicate the new URL API name Proxy environment.dcl.cloudhub.io to the consuming API clients in Europe. The correct answer is A. Explanation. Region property in Runtime Manager. In CloudHub 1.0, deployment regions are configured per application in Runtime Manager, not API Manager. If global deployment is enabled on your control plane, you can select EU Frankfurt as a region during deployment. Application names and domain URLs. CloudHub application names must be globally unique within the same domain space. However, CloudHub automatically appends a region-specific suffix to regional deployments, for example, the -c1.cloudhub.io for EU Frankfurt, compared to .us, e1.cloudhub.io, or .cloudhub.io for North America. This allows you to reuse the exact same application naming convention, API name environment, across different regions without encountering naming collisions or domain conflicts. Minimizing latency. Deploying the Mule applications directly to the target EU region, Frankfurt, brings the processing and routing closer to European consumers and downstream backends, drastically reducing network latency compared to cross-continent round trips. Why other options are incorrect B and D. API Manager is used for managing API policies, SLAs, and governance, whereas actual application infrastructure and region settings are managed via Runtime Manager. Additionally, deploying unnecessary proxy applications introduces an extra network hop, which increases rather than minimizes latency. C. Leaving the region blank forces CloudHub to deploy the application in the default North American region, meaning European users would still route to NA infrastructure and experience high latency. Q72. Which type of communication is managed by a service mesh in a microservices architecture? A. Communication between microservices runtime administrators. B. Communication between microservices developers. C. Communication between microservices. D. Communication between trading partner services. The correct answer is C. Communication between microservices. Explanation. East-west traffic management. In a microservices architecture, a service mesh operates as an infrastructure layer dedicated to handling service-to-service, east-west communication, core capabilities. It automatically manages internal network interactions, providing features like load balancing, service discovery, mutual TLS, MTLS, encryption, circuit breaking, retries, traffic routing and distributed tracing without requiring application code changes. Sidecar proxy pattern. It typically executes this by deploying sidecar proxies such as Envoy alongside each microservice instance to route and secure network traffic. Why other options are incorrect? A and B. Service meshes manage machine-to-machine network traffic within the cluster runtime, not human-to-human communications between developers or administrators. D. Communication with external trading partners, north-south traffic, or B2B integration is handled by API gateways, B2B/EDI integration tools, or edge routers rather than an internal service mesh. Q73. A Mule application uses APIkit for SOAP to implement a SOAP web service. The Mule application has been deployed to a CloudHub worker in a testing environment. The integration testing team wants to use a SOAP client to perform integration testing. To carry out the integration tests, the integration team must obtain the interface definition for the SOAP web service. What is the most idiomatic used for an intended purpose? Way for the integration testing team to obtain the interface definition for the deployed SOAP web service in order to perform integration testing with the SOAP client. A. Retrieve the OpenAPI specification files from API Manager. B. Retrieve the WSDL files from the deployed Mule application. C. Retrieve the RML files from the deployed Mule application. D. Retrieve the XML file from Runtime Manager. The correct answer is B. Retrieve the WSDL files from the deployed Mule application. Explanation. Standard SOAP interface definition, Web Services Description Language WSDL, is a standard XML-based interface definition language used to describe the capabilities, endpoints, and operations of a SOAP web service. Idiomatic APIkit for SOAP behavior. When an application is built using APIkit for SOAP and deployed to CloudHub, the underlying CXF engine automatically exposes and serves the WSDL file directly from a running endpoint, typically accessible by appending WSDL to deployed HTTP. Endpoint URL, e.g. http //appname angryfaceregion.cloudhub.io/service path WSDL. SOAP clients like SOAP UI or Postman natively consume this URL/file to auto-generate request structures for integration testing. Why other options are incorrect? A. OpenAPI specification, OAS, is used to define RESTful APIs, not SOAP web services. C. REML RESTful API modeling language is strictly used for RESTful API specifications. APIkit for SOAP uses WSDL files, not RML.d. XML files retrieved from Runtime Manager refer to application configuration files, such as Mule artifact.json or Mule XML flows, not the public contract or interface definition needed by an external SOAP testing client. Q74. A DevOps team has adequate observability of individual system behavior and performance, but struggles to track the entire lifecycle of each request across different microservices. Which additional observability approach should this team consider adopting? A. Analytics. B. Metrics. C. Tracing. D. Data mining. The correct answer is C. Tracing. Explanation. End-to-end request tracking, distributed tracing or simply tracing, is explicitly designed to track the journey and lifecycle of a single request as it propagates across multiple distributed microservices. Trace context and correlation IDs. It works by assigning a unique trace ID and correlation IDs to incoming requests. As the request moves through various network hops and services, these identifiers track execution paths, latency bottlenecks, and service dependencies across the entire call chain, solving the observability gap. While metrics tell you if a system is overloaded and log/analytics tell you what happened within a specific component. Distributed tracing connects these isolated pieces to show how requests travel to the whole ecosystem. Why other options are incorrect? A. Analytics processes aggregated historical data to uncover usage patterns or business trends, but does not track real-time end-to-end execution paths of individual requests. B. Metrics are numeric aggregations measured over time, such as CPU usage, memory utilization, request counts, or error rates. They measure health and performance of individual components, not end-to-end request flows. D. Data mining involves discovering patterns or anomalies within large datasets and is not an operational observability tool for distributed microservices request tracking. Q75. A bank is implementing a REST API in a Mule application to receive an array of accounts from an online banking platform user interface UI, retrieve account balances for those accounts from a back-end finance system, and then return the account balances so they can be displayed in the online banking platform UI. As part of the processing, the MuleSoft API also needs to insert the retrieved account data into an audit database for auditing purposes. The auditing process should not add latency to the account balance retrieval response back to the online banking platform UI. The retrieved balances flow in the Mule application is designed to use an operation in a connector to the finance system, the finance operation, that can only look up one account record at a time, and an operation from a different connector to the audit system, the audit operation, that can only insert one account record at a time. To best meet the performance-related requirements, what scope or scopes should be used, and how should they be used to incorporate the finance operation and audit operation into the retrieve balances flow? A. Wrap the finance operation in a parallel for each scope. Wrap the audit operation in an async scope. B. Wrap the finance operation in an until successful scope. Wrap the audit operation in a try-catch scope. C. Wrap both connector operations in an async scope. D. Wrap both connector operations in a for each scope. The correct answer is A. Wrap the finance operation in a parallel for each scope. Wrap the audit operation in an async scope. Explanation. To satisfy all performance requirements, two key challenges must be addressed. Handling array processing efficiently. Finance lookup the input as an array of accounts, but the finance connector can only query one account at a time. Wrapping the finance operation in a parallel for each scope allows the API to process multiple accounts concurrently using parallel threads, significantly reducing execution time compared to sequential for each loop. Non-blocking auditing. Audit log in the audit process must not add latency to the API response returned to the UI. Wrapping the audit operation in an async scope offloads a database insertion to an asynchronous thread pool. The main execution flow continues immediately without waiting for the audit write to complete, ensuring zero added latency for the end user. Why other options are incorrect. B. Until successful provides retry logic for failed operations and try handles exceptions. Neither address is iterating through an array or executing operations asynchronously to avoid response latency. C. Wrapping the finance lookup inside an async scope would cause the main flow to proceed before balance data is retrieved from the backend, leaving no data to return to the UI.D. Wrapping both operations as sequential for each scope processes accounts one by one and executes audit writes synchronously within the main thread, causing significant latency for large payload arrays. Q76. A finance giant is planning to migrate all its Mule applications to Runtime Fabric RTF. Currently, all Mule applications are deployed CloudHub using automated CI/CD scripts. As an integration architect, which of the below step would you suggest to ensure that the applications from CloudHub are migrated properly to Runtime Fabric RTF, with an assumption that organization is keen on keeping the same deployment strategy? A. No changes need to be made to pom.xml file and CI/CD script should be modified as per the RTF configurations. B. Runtime Fabric dependencies should be added as a Mule plugin to pom.xml file and CI/CD script should be modified as per the RTF configurations. C. Runtime Fabric deployment should be added to pom.xml file in all the Mule applications and CI/CD script should be modified as per the RTF configurations. D. Runtime Fabric profile should be added Mule configuration files in the Mule applications and CI/CD script should be modified as per the RTF configurations. The correct answer is C. Runtime Fabric deployment should be added to pom.xml file in all the Mule applications, and CI/CD script should be modified as per the RTF configurations. Explanation: Mule Maven plugin configuration. When deploying Mule applications to Runtime Fabric RTF via automated CI/CD pipelines, the Mule Maven plugin, in the project's pom.xml must be configured with the Runtime Fabric deployment element. This section defines RTF-specific deployment attributes, such as the target RTF environment replica count, CPU/memory allocations, target provider, and public URL mappings. Deployment target strategy: switching deployment targets from CloudHub 1.0, which uses CloudHub Deployment, to Runtime Fabric, which uses Runtime Fabric Deployment, requires updating the Maven plugin parameters inside pom.xml, as well as updating the execution commands/arguments inside the automated CI/CD pipeline scripts to target the new RTF configuration. Why other options are incorrect? A. Leaving the pom.xml unchanged will leave the CloudHub deployment configuration intact, causing Maven build tools to attempt deploying the application back to CloudHub instead of Runtime Fabric. B. Runtime Fabric is not a Mule plugin or dependency added under the Dependencies block. It is configured as a deployment strategy within the Mule Maven plugin configuration.d. Runtime Fabric deployment strategies are managed at the Maven project level, pom.xml, and pipeline level, not as a runtime profile inside Mule XML flow/configuration files. Q77. An organization plans to migrate all its Mule applications to Runtime Fabric RTF. Currently, all Mule applications have been deployed to CloudHub using automated CI/CD scripts. What steps should be taken to properly migrate the applications from CloudHub to RTF while keeping the same automated CI/CD deployment strategy? A. A Runtime Fabric dependency should be added as a Mule plugin to the pom.xml file in all the Mule applications. B. Runtime Fabric command line parameters should be added to the CI/CD deployment scripts. C. A runtimeFabricDeployment profile should be added to Mule configuration properties YAML files in all the Mule applications. CI/CD scripts must be modified to use the new configuration properties. D. RuntimeFabricDeployment profile should be added to the pom.xml file in all the Mule applications. CI/CD scripts must be modified to use the new RTF profile. E. The pom.xml and Mule configuration YAML files can remain unchanged in each Mule application. A Runtime Fabric command line parameter should be added to the CI/CD deployment scripts. Q78. An organization needs to procure an enterprise software system to increase cross-selling opportunities and better rack prospect data. Which category of enterprise software has these core capabilities when used for its typical and intended purpose? A. Supply chain management, SCM. B. IT service management, ITSM. C. Business to business, B2B. D. Customer relationship management, CRM. The correct answer is D. Customer relationship management, CRM. Explanation: core purpose of CRM. Customer relationship management systems, such as Salesforce, HubSpot, or Microsoft Dynamics 365, are designed specifically to manage an organization's interactions with current and potential customers. Key capabilities: tracking prospect data, centralizes lead management, sales pipelines, contact history, and customer interactions. Cross-selling and upselling, provides customer insights, purchasing history, and behavioral data to identify cross-selling opportunities across sales and service channels. Why other options are incorrect? A. SCM supply chain management systems focus on procurement, logistics, manufacturing, inventory control, and supply chain execution rather than sales and prospect tracking. B. ITSM IT service management software, e.g. ServiceNow, focuses on IT operations, service desks, incident management, change management, and IT asset tracking. C. B2B business to business refers to a business model/integration domain, handling data exchange between trading partners via EDI or APIs, rather than a software category designed for managing customer pipelines and cross-selling. Q79. An organization is designing a Mule application to periodically poll an SFTP location for new files containing sales order records and then process those sales orders. Each sales order must be processed exactly once. To support this requirement, the Mule application must identify and filter duplicate sales orders on the basis of a unique ID contained in each sales order record, and then only send the new sales orders to the downstream system. What is the most idiomatic, used for an intended purpose? Anypoint connector, validator, or scope that can be configured in the Mule application to filter duplicate sales orders on the basis of the unique ID field contained in each sales order record. A. Configure a cache scope to filter and store each record from the received file by the order ID. B. Configure a database connector to filter and store each record by the order ID. C. Configure an Idempotent message validator component to filter each record by the order ID. D. Configure a watermarking on new or updated file event source to filter unique records by the order ID. The correct answer is C. Configure an Idempotent message validator component to filter each record by the order ID. Explanation. Standard idempotency pattern. The Idempotent message validator component in Mule4 is explicitly designed to ensure that a given message or payload identifier is processed only once mechanism. It evaluates an expression, such as a sales order's unique ID, against an object store. If the unique ID has not been processed before, the message proceeds to a flow and the ID is recorded in the object store. If a duplicate ID is encountered, it blocks execution or routes it to error handling, effectively preventing duplicate downstream processing. Why other options are incorrect? A. The cache scope is used to store and reuse expensive execution results, such as caching API responses, to boost performance and reduce payload generation time, not to filter out duplicates based on business logic IDs to B. While a database connector could theoretically be used to query a database to check if a record exists, this requires custom database schema design and extra query overhead, instead of leveraging MuleSoft's built-in idiomatic message filtering components. D. The on new or updated file watermark tracks file attributes, such as file modification time or file name, at the inbound directory connector level to prevent rereading the exact same file. It cannot inspect, parse, or filter individual records or unique order IDs inside a file payload. Q80. Which productivity advantage does Anypoint Platform have to both implement and manage an API? A. Automatic API proxy generation. B. Automatic API specification generation. C. Automatic API semantic versioning. D. Automatic API governance. The correct answer is A. Automatic API proxy generation. Explanation. Bridging implementation and management. In Anypoint Platform, when an API specification, RML/OAS, is published to Anypoint Exchange and imported into API Manager, the platform offers a capability to automatically generate an API proxy application. Productivity advantage. Instead of manually coding a light Mule application to act as an intermediary router/shield for an existing backend implementation, Anypoint Platform auto-generates the executable deployable proxy artifact directly from the API definition. This proxy can then be immediately deployed to CloudHub or Runtime Fabric to apply security policies, throttling and monitoring without requiring developer overhead or manual implementation code. Why other options are incorrect? B. API specifications are written and designed by developers using tools like API Designer and Design Center. They are not automatically generated out of thin air. C. Semantic versioning, must be governed and updated manually by API designers/developers based on whether changes are breaking or non-breaking. The system does not automatically determine semantic versions.d. API governance rules, such as checking for proper headers, paths, or response codes, can be applied automatically via Anypoint API governance, but the governance rules and specifications themselves are defined and maintained by API architects, not automatically generated to manage implementations.
If this video helped clear up these MuleSoft concepts for you, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It really helps support the content. But don't go anywhere just yet. Stick around and jump straight into the next video to keep building your integration skills.